27 years ago, on October 15, 1998, 14-year-old Ethan Williams disappeared after school in Cleveland, Ohio, leaving no trace behind. His vanishing plunged his family into unimaginable tragedy and depression, while the entire community was thrown into confusion and fear. The Cleveland Police Department considered multiple possibilities: runaway, abduction, even suicide, but couldn't solve the case, causing outrage among the Williams family, who never lost hope and continued fighting for the truth to emerge. Before we continue, subscribe and hit the bell. Here we reopen cold cases with respect and evidence. Ethan Williams was what teachers called a quiet kid. At Franklin Middle School, he kept to himself, carried his worn backpack like a shield, and ate lunch alone in the corner of the cafeteria. His mother, Carol Williams, a single parent working double shifts at Cleveland General Hospital, noticed the changes in her son during the fall of 1998. The boy, who once eagerly shared stories about his day, had become withdrawn, his grades dropping from A's to C's almost overnight. Something was wrong, Carol would later tell investigators, her voice breaking during the recorded interview. Ethan stopped talking about school. He'd come home with torn clothes, bruised knuckles, but whenever I asked, he'd just say he fell or bumped into something. I should have pressed harder, I should have known. The bullying at Franklin Middle School wasn't subtle. Marcus Reed, Jake Thompson and their crew had targeted Ethan since 7th grade, calling him names, shoving him in hallways, and making his daily existence a nightmare. Teachers either didn't notice or chose to ignore the systematic harassment that plagued the shy teenager with thick glasses and second-hand clothes. October 15th started like any other day. Ethan attended his classes, ate lunch alone, and was last seen by his English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, leaving through the main doors at 3:15 p.m. He never made it home. When Carol returned from her evening shift at 11 p.m., expecting to find her son asleep, she discovered an empty house and a cold dinner plate still set on the kitchen table. The initial police response was sluggish. Officer Bradley Morrison, who took the missing person report, suggested Ethan might have run away due to typical teenage problems. This dismissive attitude would haunt the case for years. No Amber Alert was issued. No extensive search was organized. The Williams case became just another file in an overflowing cabinet. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Carol Williams became a ghost of herself, posting flyers on every street corner, appearing on local news stations, and pleading with anyone who might have information. The community organized search parties that combed through Cleveland's parks, abandoned buildings, and even the shores of Lake Erie. Nothing. The hardest part, Carol recalled in a 2010 interview, was not knowing. Was he alive? Was he suffering? Every time the phone rang, every knock on the door, I thought maybe today I'd get my boy back. The case grew cold as winter settled over Cleveland. Detective Sarah Martinez, who had taken over the investigation, admitted years later that they had run out of leads. The few witnesses who saw Ethan leaving school provided conflicting accounts. Security cameras in 1998 were scarce and low quality. The trail had gone completely cold. But Carol Williams refused to give up. She kept Ethan's room exactly as he left it. His Star Wars posters still hanging on the walls, his homework half finished on his desk. Every year on October 15th, she held a vigil in downtown Cleveland, determined to keep her son's memory alive and the search for truth burning. The Williams family's persistence would eventually pay off, but it would take 23 long years of unanswered questions, sleepless nights, and a mother's unwavering faith that justice would prevail. What they couldn't have imagined was that somewhere in the shadows of Franklin Middle School, a small device had been silently recording, capturing secrets that would eventually shatter everything they thought they knew about that fateful October afternoon. The morning after Ethan Williams disappeared, Cleveland awakened to a citywide search effort that would expose the deep cracks in both the community and the investigation that followed. Carol Williams hadn't slept. She spent the entire night calling hospitals, police stations, and anyone who might have seen her son. Detective Sarah Martinez arrived at Franklin Middle School at 7 a.m., her coffee growing cold as she surveyed the sprawling campus where Ethan had last been seen alive. The school's principal, Robert Hendricks, met her with visible discomfort, his hands fidgeting with his tie as he unlocked the main office. Ethan was a good student, Principal Hendricks insisted, though his personnel files told a different story. 3 incident reports from the past month alone documented altercations involving Ethan Williams. Each report was vaguely worded, filed away without follow-up, painting a picture of institutional negligence that would later become a central focus of the investigation. The initial interviews with Ethan's classmates revealed a disturbing pattern of systematic bullying that teachers had either ignored or failed to recognize. Jessica Martinez, a quiet 8th grader who occasionally spoke with Ethan in study hall, broke down during her interview with Detective Martinez. "They called him Four Eyes and Welfare Kid," Jessica sobbed. "Marcus Reed and his friends would corner him in the bathroom, steal his lunch money, and make him do their homework. Everyone knew, but nobody said anything. We were all too scared to help." The 3 main suspects emerged quickly. Marcus Reed, 15, whose father owned a construction company, Jake Thompson, 14, son of a Cleveland City councilman, and Tommy Brennan, 14, whose uncle was a sergeant in the Cleveland Police Department. Their alibis were suspiciously rehearsed and identical. They claimed to have gone directly to Marcus's house after school to work on a history project. Carol Williams grew increasingly frustrated with the investigation's pace. Detective Martinez, though well-intentioned, was overwhelmed with 17 other active cases. The search teams were scaling back after finding no physical evidence. The media's attention was already shifting to other stories. "They treated my son like he was disposable," Carol said during a press conference 2 weeks after Ethan's disappearance. "Because we don't have money, because we live in the wrong part of town, they think his life doesn't matter. But Ethan matters. My son matters." The search expanded beyond Cleveland as volunteers from neighboring communities joined the effort. Psychics called the police hotline, claiming to have visions of Ethan's location. False sightings poured in from across Ohio and neighboring states. Each lead was investigated and dismissed, adding to the growing pile of dead ends. Dr. Amanda Foster, a child psychologist consulted by the police, provided a profile that seemed obvious to everyone except the investigating officers. Ethan Williams was a vulnerable teenager who had been systematically victimized, making him a prime target for escalated violence or a potential runaway. "Children don't just vanish," Dr. Foster told Detective Martinez during their consultation. "Especially children who are being bullied. Either Ethan ran away to escape his tormentors, or something far more sinister occurred. The question isn't whether he was targeted, it's whether the targeting escalated to violence." 3 weeks after the disappearance, a breakthrough seemed to emerge. A homeless man named Charlie Dawson claimed he saw 3 teenagers roughing up a smaller boy near the abandoned Riverside steel mill on October 15th around 4 p.m. Charlie's description matched Ethan, Marcus, Jake, and Tommy, but his credibility was questioned due to his history of mental illness and alcohol dependency. The police searched the steel mill property extensively. They found graffiti, empty beer bottles, and evidence that teenagers frequently gathered there, but nothing connecting directly to Ethan's disappearance. Charlie Dawson's testimony was deemed unreliable, and the lead was abandoned. As autumn turned to winter, the search for Ethan Williams began to fade from public consciousness. Carol continued her vigil, but fewer volunteers showed up each weekend. The reward fund, initially robust with community donations, had been exhausted on private investigators and search efforts that yielded nothing. Detective Martinez filed her final report on December 30th, 1998, officially classifying the case as a missing person with suspicious circumstances. The file was transferred to the Cold Case Division, where it would sit untouched for over 2 decades. Carol Williams, meanwhile, began what would become a 23-year crusade for answers, never knowing that evidence of what truly happened to her son was hidden in plain sight, waiting for technology and determination to bring it to light. The truth about Ethan Williams's final moments was already recorded, stored in a place no one thought to look, capturing the horrific reality of what happens when bullying crosses the line into something far more sinister. By 2003, 5 years had passed since Ethan Williams vanished from Cleveland's Franklin Middle School. The case had transformed from active investigation to painful memory, from headlines to whispered conversations, from community outrage to collective amnesia. But for Carol Williams, time had stopped on October 15, 1998. The Williams house on Maple Street became a shrine to a missing boy. Carol converted the basement into a makeshift investigation center, walls covered with maps, timelines, photographs, and newspaper clippings. Red string connected suspect photos to locations, creating a web of conspiracy that consumed her waking hours. Neighbors began to whisper that grief had driven her to obsession, perhaps even madness. People stopped asking about Ethan, Carol reflected during a 2005 interview with Cleveland magazine. It's like he never existed, but a mother doesn't forget. A mother can't move on when her child is still out there somewhere waiting to be found. Detective Sarah Martinez, now promoted to sergeant, occasionally received calls from Carol about new leads, a psychic's vision, a resemblance spotted at a shopping mall, theories about human trafficking rings. Each call broke Martinez's heart a little more, reminding her of the case that had haunted her career. Meanwhile, the 3 boys who had been prime suspects in 1998 were building new lives. Marcus Reed graduated high school and joined his father's construction business, eventually taking it over and becoming a prominent figure in Cleveland's business community. Jake Thompson followed his father into politics, serving as a city council aide and later running for office himself. Tommy Brennan became a police officer, following in his uncle's footsteps, earning commendations for community service. The cruel irony wasn't lost on Carol Williams. The boys she suspected of harming her son were thriving, building careers and families, while Ethan remained frozen at 14 in everyone's memory. Justice seemed not just delayed, but deliberately buried beneath success and respectability. Franklin Middle School had undergone significant changes following the negative publicity from Ethan's disappearance. Principal Hendricks retired early, and the school implemented anti-bullying programs that arrived too late to help the boy who had needed them most. A small memorial plaque was installed near the main entrance, in memory of Ethan Williams. May his spirit inspire kindness in all who pass through these halls. Dr. Amanda Foster, the child psychologist who had profiled the case, published a paper in 2008 titled Institutional Failures in Missing Children Cases. The Williams case featured prominently, though she used pseudonyms to protect privacy. Her research revealed systemic problems in how schools and law enforcement handle bullying situations that escalate to violence. The Williams case represents a perfect storm of institutional failure, Dr. Foster wrote. School administrators ignored clear warning signs, police dismissed early leads due to class bias, and the community quickly moved on from an uncomfortable truth. This boy didn't vanish. He was failed by every adult system designed to protect him. Carol Williams sued Franklin Middle School in 2004, alleging negligence in protecting her son from known bullies. The case was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, with the school district admitting no wrongdoing. Carol used the settlement money to hire private investigators and fund continued search efforts. In 2010, the case received renewed attention when investigative journalist Linda Rodriguez produced a documentary titled Forgotten: The Ethan Williams Story. The film examined institutional failures and suggested that wealthy, connected families had influenced the investigation's direction. It sparked temporary interest, but failed to generate new leads. The documentary did, however, reach someone unexpected. Jamie Morrison, who had been a sixth grader at Franklin Middle School in 1998, contacted Rodriguez after watching the film. Jamie had witnessed something troubling on October 15th, but had been too scared to report it at the time. "I saw Marcus, Jake, and Tommy following Ethan after school," Jamie told Rodriguez during a recorded interview. "They were walking behind him, talking and laughing. I remember thinking it was weird because they usually just ignored kids like Ethan. But I was 11 and scared of them too. I didn't think anyone would believe me or care." Rodriguez shared this information with Detective Martinez, but without corroborating evidence. Jamie's decade-old memory was considered insufficient to reopen the case. The boys, now men, had solid alibis and established reputations. The moment passed, like so many others before it. By 2015, Carol Williams had aged beyond her years. The search for her son had consumed nearly 2 decades of her life. Friends suggested she move on, seek therapy, consider Ethan legally deceased. But something deep in her mother's heart insisted that answers were still out there, waiting to be discovered. She couldn't have known that across town, in the storage basement of Franklin Middle School, boxes of old equipment were gathering dust. Among them sat a small device that would eventually vindicate her faith and shatter the comfortable lives built on a terrible secret. 23 years after Ethan Williams disappeared, renovation work at Franklin Middle School would uncover the evidence that everyone had been searching for, hidden in the most unlikely place imaginable. In the spring of 2021, Franklin Middle School underwent major renovations as part of Cleveland's educational infrastructure upgrade. Construction workers, demolishing a section of the building's east wing, discovered a forgotten storage area behind a false wall. Among boxes of outdated electronics, moldy textbooks, and abandoned equipment sat a small device that would change everything. A motion-activated security camera installed by the school's former janitor, Robert "Bob" Chester. Bob Chester had worked at Franklin for 37 years before retiring in 2019. Concerned about theft and vandalism in the school's less monitored areas, he had purchased and installed several hidden cameras with his own money in 1997, never informing the administration. The camera discovered behind the east wing wall had been positioned to monitor the rear exit that students often used to skip class or smoke cigarettes. When construction supervisor Mike Torres powered up the old device, he was shocked to discover it still contained footage from October 1998. The camera's internal memory had preserved dozens of files, including one timestamped 3:22 p.m. on October 15, 1998, 7 minutes after Ethan Williams was last seen leaving school. Cleveland Police Detective James Murphy, who had inherited the cold case division, received a call that would reopen one of the city's most haunting unsolved mysteries. As he watched the grainy but clear footage on an old television in the precinct, Murphy felt his stomach drop. The video showed exactly what had happened to Ethan Williams on that fateful October afternoon. The footage revealed Ethan walking alone toward the rear exit, carrying his worn backpack and looking over his shoulder nervously. Moments later, Marcus Reed, Jake Thompson, and Tommy Brennan appeared, clearly following him. What happened next destroyed their decades-old alibis and confirmed Carol Williams's worst fears. The 3 teenagers cornered Ethan behind the school building. The camera captured Marcus pushing Ethan against the brick wall, while Jake rifled through his backpack. Tommy stood watch. What began as typical bullying quickly escalated when Ethan tried to fight back, swinging his backpack at Marcus's head. The video showed Marcus's rage exploding. He grabbed Ethan by the throat, slamming him repeatedly against the wall. Jake and Tommy, instead of intervening, began kicking the smaller boy as he fell to the ground. The assault continued for nearly 4 minutes, an eternity captured in silent, devastating footage. The most chilling moment came when Ethan stopped moving. The three boys stood over his motionless form, clearly realizing they had crossed a line from bullying into something far more serious. Marcus checked for a pulse. Jake paced frantically. Tommy repeatedly ran his hands through his hair. The camera then recorded the cover-up. Working together, they lifted Ethan's unconscious, or possibly dead, body and carried it toward the woods behind the school. The timestamp showed 3:31 p.m. They returned alone 23 minutes later, Marcus carrying Ethan's backpack, all three appearing disheveled and shaken. Detective Murphy immediately contacted the FBI and the prosecutor's office. After 23 years, they finally had definitive evidence of what happened to Ethan Williams. The case was no longer a missing person investigation. It was a homicide. Carol Williams received the call she had been waiting for her entire adult life on March 15, 2021. Detective Murphy asked her to come to the police station, warning her that what she was about to learn would be difficult to process. Carol, now 58 and graying, sat in the same chair where she had first reported her son missing decades earlier. "We found him," Detective Murphy said softly. "We know what happened to Ethan." Carol watched the security footage with the prosecutor and victim's advocate present. She remained silent throughout the viewing, tears streaming down her face as she finally witnessed her son's final moments. When the video ended, her first words were not about grief or anger, but about vindication. "I knew," she whispered. "I always knew those boys had hurt my Ethan. Everyone said I was crazy, obsessed, that I should move on. But I knew." Within hours, arrest warrants were issued for Marcus Reed, now 41 and CEO of Reed Construction, Jake Thompson, 40, a Cleveland City councilman, and Tommy Brennan, 40, a decorated police sergeant. The men who had built successful lives while Ethan Williams remained 14 forever were about to face justice for their teenage crime. The discovery of the hidden camera footage sent shockwaves through Cleveland. The three suspects had lived openly in the community for decades, their secret buried with their victim. But technology and persistence had finally exposed the truth, proving that some secrets are too dark to stay hidden forever. The arrest of three prominent Cleveland citizens for the murder of Ethan Williams sent shockwaves through the city's power structure and social hierarchy. Within 24 hours of the hidden camera footage's discovery, Marcus Reed, Jake Thompson, and Tommy Brennan were taken into custody, their decades-old secret finally exposed. Marcus Reed was arrested at his construction company's headquarters during a board meeting. FBI agents escorted the CEO from the building in handcuffs as news crews captured the dramatic scene. Reed Construction, which had contracts throughout Ohio, immediately suspended all operations pending the investigation. Jake Thompson's arrest occurred during a city council session where he was ironically advocating for youth violence prevention programs. The footage of Thompson being led away in shackles while his political colleagues watched in stunned silence would become one of the most shared videos on Cleveland's social media. Tommy Brennan, perhaps most shocking of all, was arrested at Cleveland Police Headquarters where he worked. His fellow officers, who had respected him for 20 years, could barely comprehend that their colleague had not only committed murder as a teenager, but had spent 2 decades investigating crimes while hiding his own. The three men were charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Despite their lawyers' attempts to argue that the statute of limitations had expired, prosecutors maintained that murder has no time limit, especially when the defendants actively concealed their crime. Carol Williams stood on the courthouse steps surrounded by media as the charges were announced. For the first time in 23 years, she smiled genuinely. "Today, my son finally gets justice," she said, her voice steady and strong. "Ethan can rest now, knowing the truth is out there." The hidden camera footage, became the centerpiece of a prosecution case that seemed airtight. Digital forensics experts confirmed the video's authenticity and timeline. The footage clearly showed premeditated assault escalating to murder, followed by body disposal and evidence destruction. Defense attorneys for the three men attempted various strategies. Reed's lawyer argued the death was accidental, claiming the teenagers never intended to kill Ethan. Thompson's attorney suggested the video was unclear about his client's level of participation. Brennan's defense team focused on his exemplary police record and community service. But the video was devastating. Enhanced digital analysis revealed details invisible to the naked eye. Audio enhancement technology, unavailable in 1998, picked up fragments of conversation, including Marcus Reed saying, "We can't let him tell anyone about this." The search for Ethan's body became a massive undertaking. Ground-penetrating radar scanned the woods behind Franklin Middle School. Cadaver dogs were brought from across the Midwest. Archaeologists and forensic anthropologists joined the search, treating the site like a scientific excavation. On April 3, 2021, searchers found human remains buried 4 feet deep in a makeshift grave, approximately 200 yards from where the video showed the 3 teenagers carrying Ethan's body. Dental records confirmed the remains belonged to Ethan Williams. He had been 14 for 23 years, waiting to be found. The autopsy revealed the true extent of the assault Ethan had endured. Dr. Patricia Hoffman, the forensic pathologist, determined that Ethan died from blunt force trauma to the head and strangulation. The injuries were consistent with the violent assault captured on video. This was not an accident, Dr. Hoffman testified during the preliminary hearing. The victim sustained multiple traumatic injuries that would have required significant force. This was a sustained attack that resulted in death. As news of the arrest spread, other former Franklin Middle School students began coming forward with stories of bullying and violence they had witnessed but never reported. The culture of silence that had protected Reed, Thompson, and Brennan for decades began crumbling. The 3 defendants pleaded not guilty, but their legal strategies began diverging as prosecution pressure intensified. Plea negotiations started behind closed doors, with prosecutors offering reduced sentences in exchange for cooperation and full confessions. The case rekindled national conversations about school bullying, institutional accountability, and the long-term consequences of childhood violence. Carol Williams became a reluctant advocate, speaking at conferences and schools about the importance of addressing bullying before it escalates to tragedy. Ethan's story isn't just about murder, Carol said during a victim impact statement. It's about every adult who saw signs and did nothing, every teacher who ignored the bullying, every administrator who filed reports and forgot them, every police officer who dismissed a missing child because of where he lived. If this case has gripped you already, hit the like button. It helps Ethan Williams's story reach more people. The discovery of the hidden camera hadn't just solved a murder, it had exposed decades of institutional failure and social indifference. Justice for Ethan Williams was finally within reach, but the reckoning for those who failed him was just beginning. As the legal proceedings intensified in the spring of 2021, the weight of 23 years began crushing the 3 men who had carried the secret of Ethan Williams's death. The brotherhood of silence that had protected them since high school began fracturing under prosecutorial pressure. Tommy Brennan was the first to break. On May 12, 2021, facing the destruction of his police career and the potential for life imprisonment, Brennan met with prosecutors to negotiate a plea agreement. His confession, delivered in a sterile conference room at the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, finally revealed the complete truth of what happened on October 15, 1998. "We never meant for it to go that far," Brennan began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It started like it always did. We were going to mess with Ethan, take his lunch money, rough him up a little. But he fought back that day. He actually fought back." According to Brennan's confession, Ethan's resistance enraged Marcus Reed, who had been struggling with anger issues and family problems at home. When Ethan swung his backpack and connected with Marcus's face, something snapped. Marcus lost control, Brennan continued. He started choking Ethan, screaming that he was tired of the little freak disrespecting him. Jake and I tried to get him to stop, but Marcus was bigger than us. When Ethan stopped moving, we all panicked. The confession revealed that Ethan was still alive when they carried him into the woods. The 14-year-old regained consciousness briefly, looked up at his attackers and whispered, "Please don't hurt me anymore." Those were Ethan Williams's last words. Marcus said we couldn't take him to a hospital because we'd all get in trouble, Brennan's statement continued. He said Ethan would tell everyone what we did, so we left him there. We just left him to die. Brennan's cooperation earned him a reduced sentence of 15 years for voluntary manslaughter and conspiracy. His testimony would prove crucial in convicting his former friends, but it couldn't restore the police career he had built on a foundation of lies. Jake Thompson's defense crumbled next. Faced with Brennan's testimony and video evidence, Thompson's attorneys advised him to accept a plea deal. During his confession on June 8, 2021, Thompson revealed additional details that painted an even darker picture of that October afternoon. After Ethan died, Marcus made us swear an oath, Thompson confessed. He said if any of us ever told anyone, he would kill us too. We were 14 and scared, and we believed him. Thompson's plea agreement resulted in an 18-year sentence for second-degree murder and conspiracy. His political career ended instantly, and his family faced social ostracism throughout Cleveland. His confession included an apology to Carol Williams, though she refused to hear it. "I don't want his apology," Carol told reporters outside the courthouse. "I want my son back, and that's something none of them can give me." Marcus Reed remained defiant until the end. His defense team, led by prominent criminal attorney David Rothstein, maintained that the video was ambiguous and that Ethan's death was accidental. Reed refused plea negotiations, insisting on his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. The trial began on September 15, 2021, exactly 23 years after Ethan Williams's murder. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Maria Santos, presented a methodical case built around the hidden camera footage, forensic evidence, and the confessions of Reed's co-conspirators. Marcus Reed was not just a bully, Santos argued in her opening statement. He was a killer who spent 23 years building a life while Ethan Williams lay buried in the woods, denied the chance to grow up, go to prom, graduate high school, or become the man he might have been. The defense's strategy focused on Reed's age at the time of the crime and his exemplary adult behavior. Rothstein argued that a 14-year-old's moment of rage shouldn't destroy a man's entire life, especially when that man had become a pillar of the community. But the jury saw through the defense's arguments. After deliberating for 6 hours, they returned a guilty verdict on all charges: first-degree murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Marcus Reed was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The discovery and prosecution of Ethan Williams's killers sent ripples through Cleveland's educational and law enforcement communities. Franklin Middle School implemented comprehensive surveillance systems and mandatory anti-bullying training. The Cleveland Police Department reviewed all cold cases involving missing children to ensure no other victims were forgotten. Dr. Amanda Foster, the psychologist who had profiled the case in 1998, published a follow-up study on the long-term psychological effects of covering up violent crimes. Her research showed that Reed, Thompson, and Brennan had all struggled with anxiety, depression, and substance abuse issues throughout their adult lives, the hidden cost of carrying such a dark secret. The perpetrators became victims of their own crime, Dr. Foster observed. They were psychologically imprisoned by their secret, unable to form genuine relationships or find authentic happiness. Justice delayed is justice denied, but secrets this dark eventually destroy everyone they touch. Carol Williams finally held a funeral for her son on October 15, 2021, exactly 23 years after his death. Ethan was buried in a small ceremony attended by family, friends, and many community members who had supported the search over the decades. His gravestone bore a simple inscription: Ethan Williams, 1984-1998, beloved son. Justice finally found. The conviction of Marcus Reed, Jake Thompson, and Tommy Brennan for the murder of Ethan Williams triggered a comprehensive examination of institutional failures that had allowed a brutal crime to remain hidden for over 2 decades. Cleveland's educational, law enforcement, and political establishments faced uncomfortable questions about systemic negligence and social inequality. Franklin Middle School faced the harshest scrutiny. A federal investigation revealed that the school had received 47 formal complaints about bullying in the 1997-98 academic year, with Ethan Williams mentioned in 11 separate incidents. Principal Robert Hendricks, now retired, had signed off on minimal disciplinary actions, while serious violence escalated unchecked. The Williams case represents a catastrophic failure of our duty to protect children, admitted Dr. Sandra Mitchell, Cleveland's current superintendent of schools, during a press conference in October 2021. We failed Ethan Williams, we failed his mother, and we failed our community's trust. The Cleveland Teachers Union demanded accountability from administrators who had ignored clear warning signs. Jennifer Hayes, who had taught 7th grade English in 1998, came forward with disturbing revelations about the school's culture. We all knew about the bullying, Hayes testified before the school board. I personally witnessed Marcus Reed shove Ethan Williams down a flight of stairs in February 1998. When I reported it, Principal Hendricks told me boys will be boys, and I should focus on teaching, not discipline. The school district settled a wrongful death lawsuit with Carol Williams for $3 million, while simultaneously implementing the Ethan Williams Protocol, a comprehensive anti-bullying system with mandatory reporting, surveillance monitoring, and regular psychological evaluations for at-risk students. Cleveland Police Department faced equally intense scrutiny. The initial investigation in 1998 had been marked by class bias, insufficient resources, and Detective Bradley Morrison's dismissive attitude toward a missing child from a low-income family. Morrison, now retired, refused interview requests, but was publicly censured by the department. Internal Affairs launched a review of all missing persons cases from 1995-2005, discovering patterns of inadequate investigation when victims came from disadvantaged backgrounds. The review led to policy changes requiring supervisor approval for any case downgraded from active to cold status. We failed Ethan Williams and his family, admitted Police Chief Robert Wagner during a community meeting. Our investigation was insufficient, our attitude was wrong, and our commitment was lacking. We're implementing changes to ensure this never happens again. The revelation that Tommy Brennan had served as a police officer for 20 years while hiding his involvement in Ethan's murder sent shockwaves through law enforcement. His colleagues reported feeling betrayed and manipulated by someone they had trusted with their lives. Tommy was our brother, said Detective Mike Rodriguez, Brennan's former partner. We worked cases together, ate meals together, our families were friends. Knowing he was living a lie all those years makes me question everything I thought I knew about reading people. The political implications were equally significant. Jake Thompson's conviction resulted in a special election for his city council seat and triggered ethics investigations into his legislative votes, particularly those involving youth programs and criminal justice funding. Critics suggested his guilt had influenced his voting patterns as he attempted to assuage his conscience. Dr. Amanda Foster's research into the psychological effects of long-term secret-keeping revealed fascinating insights into how the three perpetrators had adapted to their hidden guilt. Reed had become increasingly authoritarian and controlling in his business practices. Thompson had advocated for youth programs while simultaneously ensuring they received minimal funding. Brennan had volunteered for missing persons cases, perhaps unconsciously seeking redemption. They were all attempting to balance the psychological scales, Dr. Foster explained in her published findings. Their adult behaviors showed clear patterns of compensation for their teenage crime. Reed dominated others because he had been dominated by his secret. Thompson advocated for children while ensuring ineffective programs. Brennan searched for missing people while hiding a missing person himself. The case sparked national discussions about juvenile accountability and the long-term consequences of childhood violence. Legal scholars debated whether 14-year-olds should face adult penalties for murder, while child psychologists argued for better intervention programs before violence escalates. Carol Williams became a reluctant but powerful advocate for systemic reform. She testified before the Ohio State Legislature about the need for mandatory bullying reports, improved school surveillance, and better police training for missing persons cases involving disadvantaged families. "My son died because adults failed him," Carol testified. "Every teacher who ignored the signs, every administrator who filed meaningless reports, every police officer who dismissed his disappearance as typical teenage behavior. Ethan Williams died because the system that should have protected him decided his life wasn't worth protecting." The Cleveland Foundation established the Ethan Williams Memorial Fund, providing resources for anti-bullying programs, family support services, and cold case investigations. The fund raised over $500,000 in its first year, demonstrating community commitment to preventing similar tragedies. Mental health professionals noted the secondary trauma experienced by everyone connected to the case. Carol Williams required intensive therapy to process 23 years of grief and vindication simultaneously. Former classmates struggled with survivor guilt and regret over their silence. Teachers who had witnessed bullying but failed to act effectively faced their own psychological reckonings. The discovery of the hidden camera had done more than solve a murder. It had exposed an entire community's complicity in a culture that devalued certain children's lives. Cleveland was forced to confront uncomfortable truths about class bias, institutional racism, and the social hierarchies that had protected privileged perpetrators while ignoring a vulnerable victim. 3 years after the convictions of Marcus Reed, Jake Thompson, and Tommy Brennan, Cleveland continued grappling with the legacy of Ethan Williams's murder and the systemic failures that had hidden it for over 2 decades. The case had become a catalyst for sweeping changes across multiple institutions, but the deepest transformations were occurring within the hearts and minds of those who had been touched by Ethan's story. Carol Williams, now 61, finally began the grieving process she had postponed for 23 years. With justice achieved and her son's killers behind bars, she could transition from crusader to mourner, allowing herself to process the magnitude of her loss. "For 23 years, I couldn't let myself truly grieve," Carol explained during a 2024 interview with Cleveland magazine. "I had to stay angry, had to keep fighting, because grief would have meant giving up on finding the truth. Now that I know what happened to Ethan, I can finally cry for the boy I lost instead of just fighting for the case I needed to solve." Carol sold the house on Maple Street, unable to continue living surrounded by decades of investigation materials and painful memories. She purchased a small cottage near Lake Erie, where she could watch sunsets and remember her son in peace. The basement investigation room was carefully packed and donated to the Cleveland Police Cold Case Division as a resource for other families seeking answers. Franklin Middle School, now renamed Ethan Williams Middle School in honor of the murdered student, had transformed into a model institution for anti-bullying programs and restorative justice practices. The school's surveillance system had been upgraded with the latest technology, while counselors and social workers maintained constant vigilance for signs of harassment or violence. Principal Maria Santos, no relation to the prosecutor, implemented the Ethan Protocol, a comprehensive system requiring immediate investigation of any bullying report, mandatory counseling for both perpetrators and victims, and regular check-ins with vulnerable students. The protocol had been adopted by school districts across Ohio and was being considered for national implementation. Ethan Williams's tragedy became our wake-up call, Principal Santos reflected. We realize that children's lives hang in the balance when adults fail to act. Every report matters, every warning sign is significant, every child deserves protection. The school installed a memorial garden near the main entrance, featuring a bronze statue of a young boy reading under a tree. The inscription read, "In memory of Ethan Williams and all children whose voices were silenced, may this place nurture kindness, courage, and justice." Jennifer Hayes, the former teacher who had witnessed bullying but felt powerless to stop it, became the school district's anti-bullying coordinator. Her work focused on training educators to recognize warning signs and providing them with tools to intervene effectively before harassment escalates to violence. "I carry the guilt of not doing more for Ethan," Hayes admitted during a teacher training session, "but I channel that guilt into action. Every teacher in this district will know how to identify, report, and address bullying. No child will fall through the cracks on my watch." The Cleveland Police Department's transformation proved equally significant. Chief Robert Wagner implemented the Williams Standards for missing persons investigations, requiring thorough documentation, supervisor review, and family liaison officers for every case involving minors. The department also established a cold case review board that re-examines unsolved cases annually. Detective James Murphy, who had inherited the Williams case and ultimately solved it, was promoted to head the new Missing Persons Division. His team included civilian advocates trained to support families during investigations, ensuring that socio-economic status would never again influence the quality of police response. "Ethan Williams taught us that every missing child matters equally," Detective Murphy explained during a police training conference. "Rich or poor, popular or outcast, every child deserves our full attention and resources. We failed Ethan, but we won't fail the next child who needs our help." The case had also prompted changes within Ohio's juvenile justice system. The Ethan Williams Amendment to state law required psychological evaluations for all juveniles charged with violent crimes, while providing funding for intervention programs designed to address the root causes of childhood aggression. Dr. Amanda Foster continued studying the long-term psychological effects of the case. Her research revealed that many former Franklin Middle School students had experienced post-traumatic stress after learning about their classmates' murder and their own inadvertent complicity through silence. "Entire communities can experience collective trauma," Dr. Foster observed. "Everyone who knew Ethan, who witnessed the bullying, who suspected something was wrong but didn't speak up, they all carry pieces of this tragedy. Healing requires acknowledging that complicity and committing to different choices." Support groups formed throughout Cleveland for families of missing children, bullying victims, and anyone struggling with the psychological aftermath of the Williams case. These groups provided safe spaces for processing guilt, grief, and the complex emotions surrounding institutional failures. Carol Williams began speaking at conferences nationwide, sharing Ethan's story and advocating for systemic reforms. Her message resonated with parents who had lost children to violence and educators committed to preventing similar tragedies. "Ethan's death wasn't inevitable," Carol told audiences. "It was preventable at dozens of points, when teachers ignored the first signs of bullying, when administrators filed meaningless reports, when police dismissed his disappearance. Every adult who failed to act bears responsibility, but every adult also has the power to make different choices." The ripple effects of Ethan Williams's case continued spreading beyond Cleveland. The hidden camera footage had been shared, with appropriate permissions, in law enforcement training programs, teaching investigators about the importance of thoroughly searching crime scenes and considering all possible evidence sources. Technology companies began marketing enhanced security systems to schools, while legislators in multiple states proposed bills requiring hidden cameras in areas where bullying commonly occurs. The balance between student privacy and safety sparked important debates about surveillance in educational settings. 3 years after justice was finally served, Ethan Williams remained frozen at 14 in photographs and memories, but his impact continued growing. The boy who had died alone and forgotten had become a catalyst for protecting countless other children from similar fates. As 2025 approaches, nearly 7 years after the hidden camera revealed the truth about Ethan Williams' murder, the ripple effects of his case continue transforming how America addresses childhood violence, institutional accountability, and the protection of vulnerable youth. What began as one family's desperate search for answers had evolved into a national movement for systemic change. Carol Williams, now approaching her 62nd birthday, has found peace in her lakeside cottage while maintaining her advocacy work. The Ethan Williams Foundation, which she established with the settlement money from the school district, has provided grants to over 200 schools nationwide for anti-bullying programs and surveillance upgrades. Her son's legacy lives on through every child protected by systems that failed him. Ethan would be 36 now, Carol reflected during a recent interview. Sometimes I imagine the man he might have become, maybe a teacher, helping other vulnerable kids. Maybe a police officer, solving cases like his own, but he'll always be 14 in my heart, and that's okay. His impact at 14 has saved more children than many people accomplish in full lifetimes. Marcus Reed, Jake Thompson and Tommy Brennan remain incarcerated, their privileged backgrounds providing no protection from the consequences of their teenage crime. Prison records indicate that all three have struggled with the reality of their situation, though their paths have diverged significantly. Reed, serving life without parole, has become increasingly isolated and bitter. Multiple psychiatric evaluations describe him as narcissistic and unrepentant, still blaming Ethan for provoking the attack that led to his death. He has shown no genuine remorse and remains a danger to others, even within the prison system. Thompson, eligible for parole in 2039, has participated in victim impact programs and earned his GED while incarcerated. His letters to Carol Williams, consistently returned unopened, reportedly expressed deep remorse and detailed confessions about the psychological toll of carrying the secret for decades. Some legal observers believe he may eventually be granted early release for good behavior. Brennan, scheduled for release in 2036, has become a model prisoner, working as a tutor for other inmates and participating in restorative justice programs. His unique position as a former police officer who committed murder as a juvenile has made him a case study in criminal justice reform. He has reportedly expressed interest in working with at-risk youth upon his release. The institutional changes sparked by Ethan's case have created measurable improvements in child safety. The Ohio Department of Education reports a 47% decrease in severe bullying incidents since implementing the Ethan Williams Protocol statewide. Similar programs adopted in 12 other states have shown comparable results. Cleveland's transformation has been particularly remarkable. Franklin Middle School, now Ethan Williams Middle School, consistently ranks among Ohio's safest educational institutions. The school's comprehensive approach to bullying prevention, mental health support, and restorative justice has become a model studied by educators worldwide. Principal Maria Santos has documented the school's journey in a book titled Never Again: How One Child's Death Transformed Education. The book details the systematic changes implemented after Ethan's murder and provides practical guidance for other institutions seeking to create safer environments for vulnerable students. "We live with the knowledge that we failed Ethan Williams," Santos wrote in her introduction. "But we channel that failure into determination. Every policy we implement, every training we conduct, every intervention we make is dedicated to ensuring no other child suffers as Ethan did." The Cleveland Police Department's transformation under the Williams standards has created a national model for missing persons investigations. Detective James Murphy, now Chief of Missing Persons, regularly trains departments across the country on proper investigative protocols and family support systems. The Williams case taught us that how we treat families in crisis reflects our values as a society, Chief Murphy explained during a recent training session. "Every missing child deserves the same level of attention, regardless of their family's socioeconomic status or social connections." The department's clearance rate for missing persons cases has improved by 73% since implementing the Williams standards. More importantly, family satisfaction surveys show dramatically improved experiences with police during the most traumatic periods of their lives. Dr. Amanda Foster's continued research has revealed the long-term psychological benefits of addressing childhood trauma through institutional reform rather than individual therapy alone. Her longitudinal study of Franklin Middle School students shows significant decreases in anxiety, depression, and behavioral problems following the implementation of comprehensive anti-bullying programs. "Ethan Williams's death created community-wide trauma," Dr. Foster observed. "But the community's response, implementing systemic changes rather than just offering counseling, has created community-wide healing. When institutions acknowledge their failures and commit to doing better, everyone benefits." The hidden camera that revealed the truth about Ethan's murder has become a symbol of the importance of thorough investigation and technological advancement in solving cold cases. The Cleveland police have since solved 17 additional cold cases using enhanced digital forensics techniques inspired by the Williams investigation. On October 15th each year, Cleveland holds the Ethan Williams Memorial Day of Kindness, encouraging acts of compassion and intervention on behalf of vulnerable individuals. Schools conduct special assemblies, police officers visit classrooms to discuss their role in protecting children, and community members pledge to speak up when they witness harassment or abuse. Carol Williams typically spends this anniversary at her son's grave, but not in sorrow. She brings fresh flowers and reads letters from children whose lives have been protected by programs established in Ethan's name. The boy who died alone and forgotten has become a guardian angel for countless others. "I used to think Ethan's death was meaningless," Carol said during the 2024 memorial service. "A bright, gentle boy killed by bullies and forgotten by systems that should have protected him. But now I see that his death had profound meaning, not because he died, but because of how we responded to his death." The case has also influenced national conversations about juvenile justice and the long-term consequences of childhood violence. Legal scholars debate whether the 23-year delay in prosecution serves justice or represents a failure of the system to address crimes promptly when they occur. Some argue that Reed, Thompson, and Brennan were different people as adults than they had been as teenagers, making their prosecutions ethically complex. Others maintain that murder has no statute of limitations and that building successful lives on hidden crimes cannot erase the original offense. The Ethan Williams case has become a standard study in law schools, criminology programs, and educational administration courses. Students analyze the multiple institutional failures that allowed the crime to remain hidden and examine the systematic changes implemented to prevent similar tragedies. As the 7th anniversary of the hidden camera's discovery approaches, Cleveland continues evolving in response to the lessons learned from Ethan Williams's death. The city that once failed a vulnerable child has become a national leader in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Ethan Williams never had the chance to grow up, attend prom, graduate from high school, or pursue his dreams. But his impact at 14 has created lasting changes that protect countless other children from suffering similar fates. In death, he achieved what he could never accomplish in life. He became impossible to ignore. The boy who was bullied, murdered, and forgotten for 23 years has become immortal through the institutions, policies, and cultural changes established in his name. Every child who walks safely through school hallways, every family whose missing person case receives thorough investigation, every community that chooses intervention over indifference carries forward Ethan Williams's legacy. Subscribe to our channel to explore more cold cases and disturbing mysteries across America. Thank you for following Ethan Williams' story. We'll see you in the next video. The hidden camera that captured Ethan Williams' final moments sits in an evidence locker at Cleveland Police Headquarters, a small device that exposed one of the city's darkest secrets. But its true power wasn't in the technology. It was in proving that truth has a way of surfacing, even after decades of silence. Ethan Williams was 14 when he died, but his story refuses to age.